Right here, you got 2 pages on the math, 60 questions in 60 minutes, starting all the way from basic sort of arithmetic, basic multiplication, division, basic single variable algebra, going all the way through pretty much what you would see about halfway through the year in a college algebra trigonometry course. So there is some trig on this test. There are a few things like imaginary numbers. There's some higher difficulty concepts up here. Preparing for the math is really straightforward, at least getting started. You go ahead, you take that 60 question set, and you see where you are. How far do you get into it? The math breaks down into 4 big topic areas: number properties, algebra, geometry, and then I tend to call it advanced topics, but it's primarily trigonometry and graphs. How do you prepare? So you start off, you take one of these math sections, and you see where you are in terms of the difficulty. And just so you know, on the English section, it goes from easier to harder. So it's a pretty straight progression. The easy problems are going to be on that, question 1, question 2 side, as you can see right here. Basically, you've got question 2, for example. They give you a set of numbers. You just find the average of those numbers. That's all there is to it for that one. Meanwhile, if you take a look at this second sheet where we've got questions like 31, you can see question 30 is a cone question. So you've got to put together something about 2-dimensional geometry and then apply it to a 3-dimensional figure. Significantly more complicated is what that one is. In terms of the content areas, number properties is the first thing. Number properties goes like this. What are odds and evens? What are the properties of odds and evens? What are the properties of negatives and positives? What are the properties of fractions versus whole numbers? And then what about real versus imaginary versus integer? So just some mathematical terms. And then finally, prime numbers. Those are the big issues in number properties. Number properties questions are actually some of the hardest ones on the test, even though sometimes people hear number properties and go, oh, that's the easiest one. So let me start off by talking about some important math terms you need for this test. Otherwise, the questions won't make sense. First things first, let's talk about the kinds of numbers there are. So you've got natural numbers, also called counting numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are your natural numbers. Next, and this is an important term, so please, please, please try to remember it because so many questions on the test ask this specific term, integer. An integer is a whole number, positive, negative, and 0. It's probably one of those areas that I see really commonly students get questions wrong the first couple times they start working with them just because they're not sure what an integer is. So if they say an integer n is defined as 2 plus x equals, all they mean is a whole number. There's a whole number that's got this math definition to it. So when you see integer, think to yourself whole number, positive, negative, or 0. Then you have rational and irrational numbers. What are rational numbers? Rational numbers are just fractions. So remember, integers are whole numbers. Rational numbers are fractions. Why are they called rational? Because they're actually ratios. Think of what a fraction is. It's something set over something else. So it really should be pronounced rational numbers, but that makes no sense in the way we say it, so they're rational numbers, fractions. Irrational numbers are numbers that can't be written as fractions, and if you write them as decimals, they never repeat. So that's like pi, or the square root of 2. Or 5. Very good. Excellent. Excellent. So then after that, those are the integers, whole numbers, positive, negative, 0. Rational numbers, the fractions. Irrational numbers, numbers that can't be written as fractions. All of those are the real numbers. After the real numbers, you have imaginary numbers. Does anybody know what imaginary numbers are? Yes, sir.
It's any number that's like, it can be real, like I, which is the square root of a negative 1.
Very good, yeah. So we're talking about the square root of a negative number. These are the highest difficulty questions on the test, but they do ask a few questions these days about imaginary numbers. So the definition of an imaginary number is the square root of negative 1. That is I. Calculators really do make a difference because if you show up without a calculator, that's bad. And I've had students do that or students tell me that they've done that. It's just only if only for confidence reasons. But beyond that, the TI-80 series graphing calculators, which are perfectly legal on this test, they have so many things on them that if you are familiar with how to use them, I solve a lot of problems that are algebra and algebraic just using the graphing features or the tabling features or the statistics features that come built into the calculator. I can't really believe that they still accept that they allow that, because think of how unfair that is. Those TI-80 series calculators are expensive. They still in this day and age cost like $80. I personally, myself, I bought mine used off of eBay for less than half that, and I do encourage you that if there is some way that you are able to afford going and getting one of those calculators used somewhere, buying it off the internet, I strongly encourage you to try and do that, because there is a lot of advantage in those. One of these ones right here. So, yep, $80, was originally designed in 1980. It actually has the same chip as the old Nintendo Entertainment System. Not the Super NES, the old original blocky Mario one. So that's how old these are. So before we go into practicing one or two of these problems here, I just want to talk about how do you make the best use of your practice time. So one mistake that students make is that they just keep on doing problems, and then they see they got the problem wrong, and they go, that's terrible, and then they move right on. You have to go ahead and see what the explanation is for that problem. You have to figure out what actually happened, what the mistake was. If you're not going back and really getting into what the mistake or the issue you made was, you're just not going to be actually improving. And it's much more important, by the way, that you put in a little focus time rather than a lot of time when you're not really paying attention and not really feeling it. This stuff is long and it's boring. And the only way you can make it even more long and boring than it is already is by being unfocused about it, because then you just got to put in that much more time to get to the same place, and it's really not fun. One piece of advice, let me give you this, is that if you find that you're actually pretty good at dealing with like the easier problems, so you take one of these tests and you find that on 1 through 30, you got maybe 3 problems wrong, maybe 4, you don't really need to put much time into that, then don't. Spend your time working on the problems you're getting incorrect. Find your level of frustration. So if you get those first 30 questions pretty much all correct, spend your time working on the second half then. There's no point to be doing stuff that you've already got down. It's just too much. It's not fun enough for you to be doing those easy problems if you don't have to. And that's generally true of all of these things. If you're good at something, don't spend your time doing it. Work on the stuff that you find challenging. Let's go ahead and take a look at question 26. So in the figure shown below, the measure of angle BAC is x plus 20 degrees, and the measure of BAD is 90 degrees. What is the measure of CAD? So how do we go about solving this? Yes.
Well, they give you BAC was x minus 20.
Good.
And then it says BAD is 90 degrees.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So this right
Yeah,
here.
when you said x minus
yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I've got the little square there for the 90. Okay. So what do we need to figure out CAD?
Oh, you figure out what x is.
Yep. And how do we do that?
use them equal to each other.
Gotcha. How do we know to set them equal to each other?
How do you know?
Ah, yes, because it kind of looks like it there. So, yeah, this is what's tricky right here, is that we don't have what we need, right? We're missing this one little piece. So let's just go ahead and label this right over here. Because they didn't tell us that the two are equal. You know, I'm looking at that. I'm not seeing a 45-degree angle mark. We just know BAC is x plus 20. We're just left with 90 right here, so we would say okay, so we get x plus y equals 70, and go ahead and plug that right back in. Measure CAD. Oh, I'm totally overthinking this. Okay. Yeah, try this again. So, what are we doing here? We're saying that these two together are 70, right?
Yeah.
So now, do you see what the next step is?
Yeah, subtract x from both sides.
That's it. So, and now take a look. That's an X right there. Parable X. We take a look at that, and what do we have? Which answer choice?
G.
G. So, what's the takeaway from this one? Don't be afraid to come up with variables yourself for this test for something you don't know. They expect you to go ahead and do that, and when you don't have enough information, you go ahead and apply that. And then what you do is you basically just follow the algebra out. That's kind of what stood me up there, was that I was trying to think if there was a shortcut that maybe I was missing, but no, you just got to follow the algebra, subtract out the x, and you're left with the y part. And that's basically how you break these down, these higher difficulty or medium difficulty geometry. Draw yourself a diagram, fill in the information that you know, go ahead and try to put together an equation, and then solve it from there. Unfortunately, as you can see, these answer choices are very abstract. That's how they put together the higher difficulty ones. When you practice your math, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have this formula bank here, because one mistake that students make, or any other kind of formula bank, this is, not the greatest formula bank in the world per se, you may find other ones you like, but the important thing is practice with this formula bank, because quite basically what will happen the first couple times out is that you will have forgotten formulas, things from geometry, the parts of a circle formula right there, three-dimensional formulas, all of that kind of stuff, particularly your graphing formulas. There's no reason when you start your practice to be stuck there on questions you can't answer just because you don't remember the actual formula. So have the formula bank in front of you, go ahead and practice with it, and when you're looking for a formula and you can't remember it, go and look at the formula bank, but just make a note that you need to review that formula and try to memorize it a little bit better.